All right, thanks everybody for joining. I'm here again with James Davis of Sea Level. How you doing, James?
Yeah, good. Thanks, mate. How are you?
Good to see you. Good to see you. I've been good. Just kind of getting back in the swing of things. I feel like from the holidays and IT Nation craziness and all that. It's like a last quarter is like a blur for me.
Well, I think 2023 is going to be even busier than last year. So,
Yeah, I'm starting to see that already. I was telling somebody earlier. Um, so both of my boys have birthdays in December, and so that means like they've got birthday parties and stuff that are going on, and then add on the different holiday parties and everything you got to go to. December's always just like, whew, we made it through December, my wife and I, and then um, seems like January is already shaping up to be very similar. So you got everything going on with work and then personal too. It's just like, whew, where's that time go?
well, we get the fun of taking a run at the year already and just keep running for the rest of
That's
the year.
right.
That's my plan.
Yep, it's good problems to have, I always say. That's right. Blessed to have those kind of problems. So we've been talking about service profitability and kind of looking at that from a data perspective and how you could really shape your business for the better. I did want to touch on today if we could talk about how does that relate to projects. And so again, looking at that from a profitability standpoint, um, but of course, you can't really look at that from a profitability standpoint without the data. So what I wanted to ask first was like, what are you seeing out in terms of the MSPs actually even doing what I'm going to call formal projects and treating them like real projects? Would you say that's 20%, 50%?
Maybe 40%. Um, and probably to define formal projects,
Right.
I would probably just say that they're actually using their PSA and tracking times against the projects in the PSA.
Mm-hmm.
So that's not even with really good scope of works and really good laid out project plans. It's really just they're separating out that it's a project and they're actually tracking their time against that project. So they've got some form of data to report. So it's quite a low uptake of working that way, which is a bit
Yeah.
scary.
Yeah, I think some of the issue with that is the project management tool of whatever your PSA is can feel kind of so daunting. And what I see a lot of people do when we go to look at their data, like we kind of go module by module from a data perspective, and then it's like we get to the project and there's like nothing in there, and so it's like, well, they say they do projects and they're just really they've got one huge ticket that's this is what we do, and so they're just dumping everything in that one ticket, and so they don't really have an idea about which projects they should be selling and what's profitable and what's not. I mean, at least they're putting it somewhere, so it's better than just nothing, I guess. But then you'll just see this massive ticket that's open for 4, 5, 6 months, and it becomes like, I don't. How are you even managing this? I don't even really get it.
Uh, and they're not. That's probably the first answer. They're not. Um, just to scare the bejesus out of some people. The worst I've seen is someone that was doing a very long-term project, like years worth. They're up to 5,000 hours of labor on a single ticket.
As far as
So,
that even works, just
ah,
you go into the ticket, you just loads and loads.
it, it's not the right way at all. So
Right.
like a really high level way that you should be looking at how to split this out is um, a ticket is a once-off sort of transactional item. So it's good for using for like deployments of a single desktop, or we're just doing a single switch changeover. That's sort of like process driven. You're going to do it in 8 hours or less is a generic rule that we recommend. And then anything over that or requires multiple touches of different vendors, different people in the client base,
Mm-hmm.
put in a project, um, because it's going to start helping you split out that, not just gather better data, but it helps you to start to visualize more complex steps. And even if you
Mm-hmm.
just start with a couple of tickets, and it's not a well built out work plan,
Right.
that starts to go and help. improve data and how are you actually delivering those things in the first place.
Right. So yeah, I think you were kind of hitting on that. So like what is a project? First off, when does a ticket become a project? Because there's always this like, well, if we deploy 2 desktops, is that a project? Is it 20? Like, what is that number? Because at some point it becomes like, well, if you have to plan it, certainly if you have to quote it, because some people like don't like if it's just a monitor, they don't even quote it. They'll just email me the approval or whatever, and we'll come out and deploy it. But if you have to quote it, that's certainly at least a project. It might still be a ticket, but depending on what it is. But I always say like, and it's different for different MSPs. It seems like most people kind of settle around 5 desktops, just to kind of use a desktop example. Certainly office moves, anything that's kind of obvious, but if it's going to require, like you say, multiple vendors. But my point is like, have a definition of what that is going to be. And then, okay, let's talk about your project quoting process, because this is where all this starts. Because you can't, if you're treating it like a ticket where you're just kind of like randomly come out, you didn't quote like project management time. And whether or not you do it as a different line item or not, or you just bake it in, doesn't really matter for this conversation. But do you have that built in there where you can afford to have somebody come in and actually manage the project? Because the customer's expecting you to manage the project, for sure.
And that's starting to open up the cans of worms of what sort of stuff you're actually doing in terms of project management. Because often when we MSPs hear that term, they jump to ultra bureaucracy. It's like It's an all or nothing approach. We need to have full on project management and like do everything 100% right. But the typical MSP projects are like 20 hours worth of work. You're spending that much time on the bureaucracy side rather than the coordination and execution side. That's, you're not going to be profitable in the first place.
Right.
So often what I see, like I said, is that extreme of either we've got a lot of bureaucracy that's very inefficient, or there's nothing. And we just, like you said, we just randomly do stuff and we just get it done at a certain point when it's not busy on the service desk, when we're not getting smashed by P1s or something, then we'll go and jump in and do the project. Where being able to separate it off and then being able to start to see data and start to plan in a simple way, then we can be a lot more effective and efficient, and more profitable as well at that point. And I think the biggest challenge, biggest impact for MSPs with projects more than anything is cash flow, because most MSPs don't take upfront payment. They'll take a prepayment for hardware, but they don't take anything for labor. So the longer it takes, pretty much you've got this carryover liability that you're not actually getting it billed out, and it hugely affects your cash flow, because we're pretty much treating ourselves as a credit agency.
How do you help with that kind of stuff? Because some things, even if you're a fantastic delivery, the client might push it back. Like, okay, this office move we're not going to do for 3 more months because of whatever reason. You promote like milestone billing, or more? You generally upfront?
Me personally, in MSP where I worked, it was 100% prepayment for every project.
Oh, really? Wow. I was gonna say I did 50%. I did 100% for procurement, product, and then 50% for labor. Because sometimes people will be like, I'm not really sure how long it's gonna take and stuff and whatever. I don't want to pay you until it's done to make sure you do it the right way. I don't know, whatever. But I didn't get a lot of pushback then. But I keep hearing more from MSPs like they're just scared to do that at all. Like at all. So they're just all the risk is on them, which just stresses everybody out.
And what I found, so the reason why I went to full 100% fixed price, our clients trusted us. We're going to deliver it. Right. And because we quoted a fixed price, it's very easy to take a prepayment because the client knows how much it's going to be. Whereas a lot of MSPs scope up and estimate. So
Right.
if I was a client and had an estimate, I'm not going to prepay for you telling me it's 20 hours, but it might be 50.
Right.
There's no certainty. So it was easier to get that full prepayment when it was
So
like,
you weren't
well,
doing an estimate. You're doing like a fixed fee, even if we go over. I mean,
Yep.
aside from outside of scope, this is what it's going to be. Yep.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we just wore that.
We did the same thing. Yep.
And that helped with a lot of things. It forced us to be like, actually, we need to do this and do this well.
Mm-hmm.
And once we learnt some lessons, so I went 3 years with never having a not profitable project. So every project we did was profitable for 3 years.
Right.
Because we knew the scopes, we could deliver it. That's sort of the dream at that point. But
I had that until OneDrive came out.
I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
Had a client like, oh, we're just gonna move our entire file server over to OneDrive, and I was like, okay, I guess that's what it's supposed to do. Oof, that was a tough lesson.
Yeah, you only make those mistakes once though in this model, don't you? Whereas when you're doing it bill by the hour, you don't actually learn these lessons because you're not tracking the data. You're just going,
right.
We estimated it for 20 hours. We're just going to bill it. We feel guilty because we took so long to deliver all of these things. It's an emotional thing. And we've got, because we're not using projects well enough, we don't actually know the true profitability a lot of the time. Because I'll be honest, most people that are doing projects, they've got project techs that are special. They don't enter time. So most people don't even have data for how the projects are going. And this is where it really impacts the business a lot. So my utopia of selling 100%, like often when I tell that to MSPs, they get worried about it and they will compromise and go to what you were doing, take 50% of the labor and then do it on completion.
Yep.
Which that's fine. You just need a standard, but you need to collect some cash up front. The thing that helped me with the fixed price, apart from driving delivery and all the risk is on us to actually do it properly, and the pressure, is actually at the end as well. Because we've already collected the cash, I found once we were doing the fixed price and we had already had the cash, the client actually wouldn't throw up roadblocks to say, you're not finished yet. Whereas when you're waiting to go, oh, well, I need to collect $30,000 of labor. And actually at that point in time when we're ready to complete, maybe they don't have the cash at that point. Maybe they need to wait another month till they have the cash to pay.
Right.
They'll delay it. They'll come up with stupid little things to go, nah, you're not done yet. I need you to do this. I need you to do that. And then that continues dragging.
Yeah.
Whereas when I had the payment, it was like, right, we're done. Clients might have an issue or two. That's fine. We're going to deal with it. We fix it. We move on. But we've already completed the project, completed and collected the cash.
So you mentioned you could sell that 100% prepay pretty well because the clients trusted you, obviously because you got history and stuff with them. What about, I see a lot of projects at the very beginning of a client as you're kind of taking them on where that trust hasn't been built up yet. How would you kind of address that?
We never did them.
You never did what?
We never did projects as the introductory to a client.
Okay. So you just take them on as is?
Yep. We take them on as is and then build a relationship and find the recommendations and then set out the projects and have enough information to back, here's our fixed price. We're going to be able to do it and deliver it to you.
Yeah.
Because we found anytime we had a new client or someone randomly contacted us and say, oh, I want to do a server refresh first, and then we'll talk about managed services. Those projects never went well.
So would you charge for onboarding, or you treat that as a project?
So we would do an onboarding project. We didn't charge it.
Mm-hmm.
We just did it as we're onboarding you.
Just kind of baked it in.
And we just baked it in. We were a premium offering in our managed services, so we sort of just knew what we were doing, and we would be quick to give the clients recommendations to do projects to improve their environment.
But you would treat that just like a regular project, even if it was paid.
Yep.
The onboarding project as well.
Yep. Yep, it was still tracked as a project that we're doing this onboarding. We had a project plan. It was just a no charge project. So we still have the data and stuff to track gross margin over the long term. And it worked for us purely because of the client relationships and how we went about it. And it was really because this business is that relationship trust base. If you don't know enough about the client and they don't know enough about you're flying blind. And rather than being a reactive sales organization that would rely on the client to tell us what we needed, we had a clearly defined standardized stack, and we would tell the client that you need to have this to solve this problem, you needed to have this, you need to have this, and we just chip away. And one of the big tips I often give is because of that reactive nature of most MSPs, when we get a client requesting something, often this owner or the account manager gets super excited that they're requesting something. So we overstep and trying to sell too much at one time.
Yeah.
So I learned we never sold an IT. We stopped selling IT refreshes because it was too big. They would fail. We would just go, well, we're going to phase this out. We'll sell it as each individual project. We'll do a network upgrade. Then we'll do a server refresh. Then we'll do a 365 migration, whatever made sense.
Yeah. I've seen that approach before. I didn't do that at my MSP, but just because I wasn't aware of it. But you're right. The whole, like, try to eat the whole thing at once just becomes too cumbersome. There's way too much going on. I like that approach much better.
Faster sales turnarounds. But more importantly, much easier for a project team to actually manage, because as soon as the bigger the scope, the more vagueness, the more difficult it becomes, where if you just chew it off in little bites, if we're changing a firewall, we know what the scope is, we know what that impacts. If you're doing that plus a 365 migration, plus a workstation deployment, plus this, plus that, all at one go, what's broken what's actually under the project, what's just an issue, what should be out of scope, like all of that starts to get really difficult for the tech team to actually manage and be successful at delivering the project. And that's where that cash flow problem compounds, because if you've got big $200,000, $300,000 project and you're not really capturing any cash,
right, this
could drag on for, like you said, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months till you're at completion and the client's happy to pay. And then you're at the whim of that the client's cash flow as well. Right. Whereas my way of doing that, taking 100% prepayment, they've committed, they've paid, they've had the cash. So when they actually sign off on it, they're actually ready to do it, which makes it a hell of a lot easier to get everything done very quickly.
Yep. Gotcha. So we talked a little bit about project management, and like you touched on earlier, a lot of people think that's now I have to hire somebody that's got a PMP certification and a full team or something, whatever the overkill is. Somebody I heard recently, and I don't know if the number is exactly right, but the average MSP is about 7 in headcount, somewhere in that that range. When does it make sense to have somebody do project coordination? Because I think a lot of people think, like, I need to hire a specific project coordinator. And then I also see a lot of people, most of the time, like especially at that under 10 headcount, it's the owner sells the project, assigns it to an engineer, and that's pretty much all of the management that happens. Then the engineer just does it, but there's no real like cost management or anything like that.
So my general recommendation is at that sort of 7 to 10 person part, you're typically going to have a non-billable resource. And this is where, whether they're a service coordinator or operations coordinator, whatever you sort of call them, they're the sort of person that they're not going to be fully utilized in the multiple hats that they wear. They'll probably do the procurement, they'll probably do a bit of sales admin, they'll do some dispatching on the service. They're often the perfect people to do the project coordination. They already know what's going on in all the flow. And a lot of the time they're the ones that are pointing the guys in the right direction, and have some semblance of understanding of the financial and commercial aspects of it.
Right. So when we see, we look a lot at the data analytics from how have your past projects gone from a cost performance index, and we use all these kind of metrics to figure that kind of stuff out. But most of the time, I'll say when I see projects that have gone awry, it's simply because there was just no regular check-in or management to say, what did we sell and what are we delivering and how do those line up? And then you get to the end and it's like, hey, we got this done, but it was 3 times the amount of hours that it took to actually deliver. And here's the big problem that I see is they don't go back and then either how could we have been more efficient, but more specifically, is our quoting process completely off? Are we way under quoting what we're doing? Like, where's the disconnect there? It's just they just keep doing it and they'll just do it again and again. And you just see them over and over and over in the data.
And that's because it's technically led. So
Right.
it's often the owner, like you said, the owner's doing the sale, and then they've got a senior engineer that's delivering it. None of them are ever looking at how much time does it actually take to do project management and planning.
Mm-hmm.
What are the other time that projects take? So when they scope it, they're like, well, it's going to take me X amount of hours to do all the technical work. They're not like, this is all the extra running around that I have to do around that to actually be profitable, because it's just not in their heads. Where a non-technical person will know, well, we're going to have to communicate with clients, we have to do this communication with the vendor, etc. And like what you just said around that ongoing check-in, it's exactly right, because what's happened is the owner used to deliver projects, and then they've got a senior engineer that's sort of, it's a bit cynical saying it, but they've pretty much molded them to a minion, a mini me.
Right.
They can be dumped into the deep end, and they'll just work it out and they'll get it done at some point, and they can be trusted to do that.
Mm-hmm.
But they're not thinking about how to do it in a structured manner. They're not worried about how fast the turnaround time. They're not worried about when are we going to get the cash delivered. All of those kinds of things.
Right.
When you get some of that foundational planning in place of when will we deliver, when will we start to deliver it, when do we expect it to be done by, and what are the main milestones that we need to achieve, that's pretty much your project plan, very simply, without a huge amount of bureaucracy. And as long as that sort of coordination resource is involved in that, they'll make it happen, because they're the ones that are already coordinating the day-to-day service work.
Yep.
And that's often what drags people away from projects as well, and affects the duration of time, is we don't actually dedicate time to projects.
Mm-hmm.
Forget if we dedicate a full-time resource to delivering projects, and that's a volume game. It's purely what's our priority. So in my old MSP, we had a priorities list in our organization of like the normal service and project delivery of what takes precedence. And at the very top was projects, because we knew if we got in, dedicated the time to actually get the project done and turned around, we knew that was going to impact service a lot better. Because
yeah, that's true. Yep.
It resolved issues straight away. Like if we put in a new firewall and we're not getting VPN downs and like stuff like that,
right,
we're getting less phone calls. So let's just get it done. Let alone realizing the cash, or making our clients trust us. It was like, actually, it impacted our managed services gross margin.
Mm-hmm.
So the more that we did that, the better we were. And once we started to get more mature, we just knew how many projects could we realistically deliver in our team for the size that we were. And that's what we'd sell to. And
yeah, I think that's a lot of the issue. Getting back to that problem I was talking about earlier, is people don't have a real idea. Again, if the owner is the one quoting it and they're thinking like, well, I used to do it this fast, and then they're trying to sell it, obviously. So they might, instead of 12 hours, they're quoting at 10, whatever the item is. But then they're thinking like, I could do it this fast, so and so must be able to do it fast, even though I'm paying him a third of what that I was making at the time. But you just get really bad at your forecasting and delivery and what you can actually do. And so what I see happen is, well, I promised the client this by this date. So then we start pulling resources off of the service desk, and then everybody's like all over the place. So then you think about, what is the technician incentivized to do? Then they're jumping between reactive service tickets, proactive service ticket, and then a project, and they're just all over the place. And then you just see, like, it just feels like you just made it to the end of the day or the end of the month and you survived.
Mm.
And it's because you just don't have that data to sit there and look at, or you don't ever sit down and look at the data. You have the data, you just don't sit down and look at the data to say, like, maybe I need to hire another project engineer, or somebody, maybe I need somebody just dedicated project, or whatever the decision is. It's just sitting down and looking at that stuff in a consistent way and making, if you just look at the data, it becomes glaringly obvious. Hey, we're underquoting this by 30% or 80%, whatever it may be.
And it, like you said, it really becomes very simple for resourcing with the data, because you can do it with managed services, but you have to be a lot more mature to be able to forecast when we need to add extra people, etc. Projects and professional services are really easy. They need to be generating 2.5 to 3 times their salary. So if they're earning $10,000 a month, they need to generate at minimum $25,000 in a month of service labor.
Yep.
So if they're fully dedicated, there's your capacity. If you're using really simple numbers because it's still a bit early, but just assume you're charging $250 an hour for your projects. It's got to do 100 hours worth of projects in that month.
Mm-hmm.
You can then quite simply go, well, for the starting point, well, there's our target. I know I need to sell that much. I'm not going to sell any more at this point. We'll just get it consistent. And then knowing that, well, we've got some capacity still, so we could ramp that up, got another potential 30 hours worth of capacity. So we need to actually start selling an extra 60, and then we can start hiring the next person.
Yeah.
Because we've got that sort of financial backing. And it's purely that's the sales funnel to service labor. It's not very complicated as long as you know how much you're actually selling and what your potential pipeline looks like,
right,
and your sort of your sales churn rate, your sales success rate.
That's right. All right. Well, we run out of time. I always feel like there's a million other things I want to talk about every time. We just kind of scratching the surface on projects, but we'll pick that up later. It was great chatting with you as always, and it's in the morning for you, so have a great day.
Well, thanks for having me again.
All right, man. See you later.
All right, thanks.